to share it with everybody. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do today, I've taught many first-time home buyer classes. And this is a great way to not just generate business by hosting home buyer classes. So we're going to record this here too. I'm going to kind of do an overview of one, how I set the appointment up. Like if I'm talking to a new buyer who I can tell is a first-time buyer, some of the questions I'll ask. And typically, I mean, it's a very high conversion rate when you ask the right questions to a first-time buyer, because most people want free information. And that's what we're doing with this, is our job is to educate and empower buyers out there, because most people don't understand the process of purchasing a home. So I think I've done some of it where I've done like the escrow timeline, but what I'm also going to do is cover other areas of what I do in the home buyer class. And we also want to try to emphasize to the buyers, because most of them, if I ask the question, if you were all just pretending to be first-time buyers right now, I would ask the question, who here understands how agents are paid in selling real estate, right? Like how does an agent get paid? And they don't know. Most don't understand that the way a buyer's agent gets paid is from the seller. They think maybe they have to pay some money. They don't understand that part of the process. And we assume that the buyers already know, they understand. As you all know, it's a complicated process, which creates good things. It creates some uncertainty out there, which is the issue. And we have to be able to address that to try to get them to come in, make them feel safe, make it seem as easy as possible. And then at the end of the meeting, that they're going to feel comfortable being able to know how to buy a house. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes.
Any questions, I guess, before I get into it, or have any of you been to a home buyer class before?
No.
Have you been to one before or been to a few? You used to put them on. Okay, anybody else?
No.
Okay, so you've never
First
been
time.
to a home buyer class. So first, if you ever want to check it out, VCCDC is a good organization to go check out their home buyer class. It's called Ventura County Community Development Corporation. So that's V, 2 C's, a D and a C, and just put in vccdc.org. Okay. They do them every month, one in English, one in Spanish, typically every month. Actually, sometimes there's more than that, but at least every month there's one in English, one in Spanish. They do home buyer classes. Their classes are supposed to be 8 hours, they're roughly about 6 hours. It's actually HUD approved, so they qualify for first-time home buyer programs. That's another thing that most people aren't aware, that there's programs out there for first-time buyers. And some people will call you about it. Some lenders will promote it. Many won't, though. Does anybody know why lenders won't promote first-time buyer classes? Any guesses? Do you know?
Longer process.
Longer process.
So is it more expensive?
It's less profitable for the loan officer. Okay, they don't get paid much money on it. Some who want to do it, they want to be classified as a first-time home buyer specialist. So there's a program called Cal HFA. Okay,
How?
Cal CAL HFA. That's a down Cal HFA, right? Some people call it CHFA. It's a down payment assistance program out there. So there's different types of programs. The first thing to typically qualify for a first-time buyer program is that they couldn't have been a homeowner in the last 3 years. So if they were a homeowner 4 years ago and they sold 4 years ago, or short sale, or lost their home, if it was more than 3 years ago, they're first-time buyers again, even though they purchased before in the past. Another qualification most people don't know and realize is if there's been a divorce. So say they bought with somebody 2 years ago, but they just had a divorce less than a year ago, or just recently, that can also allow them to be a first-time buyer again. Okay, so that's another program. You just want to be aware and familiar. That's why when I mentioned VCCDC, they have some great programs, and there's different types of down payment assistance. Most of it are loans with simple interest. So it's like 3% simple interest. So that Cal HFA I told you about, the good thing about that is it's a moderate income program. So what that means is for Ventura County, the cost of living is high, right? So low income in Ventura County, household size of 4 is right around $92,000 to $94,000 a year. That's considered low income. If you make less than 94, and you have at least 4 people in your household, so that could be 2 adults and then 2 kids, right? That's 4. And you make less than 92, you can qualify for low income. The good news to that is that the down payment assistance, like through VCCDC, they do either a 3-to-1 or a 4-to-1 match, meaning all you have to come out of pocket is like $7,500. $7,500 out of pocket. They will match it 3-to-1 or 4-to-1, so it's between $20,000 to $30,000 in grants that's forgiven after 5 years. So all they have to do, you can't buy it for investment. You have to intend to occupy the property. So you're actually not even supposed to rent rooms out, right? You have to buy it for your household, move into the house. And this is a great program that I didn't even know existed. I had been in the business 10 years, and then I found out about this. And I was thinking, like, how many people can I help out, right? There's so many people out there that I know that make less than 90,000 a year for a household size of 4 or less, right? There's so many. And then household size of 1 is still right around, I want to say about 60,000. It's up now. So if you're around 60 and you're single, right, 1 person, you can qualify for this down payment assistance, low income down payment assistance, which is the best because this is all free money from the state. So it's forgivable grants. So you live in there for 5 years and all the grants is forgiven. So it's usually about, so for 5 years, if you do the math, I think it's 20% of that every year is forgiven and drops off. So if you're only there for 2 years, let's just say it's $22,000 in grants, right? You're there for 2 years, 20 is an even number, that's easier. So that's divided by 5, that's 4,000 a year drops off. So you made 4,000 in the first year, second year, another 4,000, third year, another 4,000, your fourth, another 4, right? So you're there for 4 years, 16,000 is forgiven. You made $16,000 with coming in with only 7,500 out of pocket. So what I'll do sometimes is I'll share a quick story. And this is the easiest way. You start explaining all these numbers, just like what I'm seeing here. I'm seeing you guys, you obviously know more than the average person out there. So you're able to comprehend what I'm saying. The average person doesn't, but they can relate to stories, right? So what I tell them is a story, and this is a true story. Had some good friends of mine. They were saying, you know, we're thinking about buying a house. We're at a birthday party. And then another friend's like, you need to talk to Brandon and Danielle. They sell real estate. They're good at what they do. Talk to them, right? They'll take care of you. They're like, all right, cool. So then we go to, what's it, Setabello's over here in River Park, the collection. So we go there. My buddy, his name's Jason. He brings his little notepad. He's there to take his notes, right? We're going to have some wine and just hang out and talk about the process. So we start going through it. And there's certain things that I get into, but I say, you know, I didn't know if they qualify for the down payment assistance program to start with. They didn't qualify for the low income. They qualified for that CalHFA I told you, which is called moderate income. Guess how high my moderate income goes to in Ventura County?
800.
180,000 combined income. It's like 180 to 190 is considered moderate income. Everybody qualifies for moderate income. Almost everybody you know can do that CalHFA moderate income. Okay. Now, the thing that I have to give you the caveat is right now in this market, it is very challenging to use down payment assistance and get an offer accepted. I'm just being brutally honest, very direct, very upfront. Doesn't mean you can't do it, but you all need to know about these programs because there is going to be a time that these programs are going to be bread and butter for you. And I promise you, you're going to do at least 4 or 5 deals from this. And the cool thing is when you help them, just like the story I'm going to share with you right now, when you help them with their first home, my clients, so the Jason and his wife, they bought their first place. They had a little one over by the Vineyards, North 8th Street, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, little 1,200 square foot home, single story, 2-car garage. It's detached. If you all know those vineyards over there. At that time, HOA was around $350 a month. Does anybody know what the HOAs are there now?
600.
It's 600. Well, I knew it was over 450. But it's, yeah, so now it's up to 6. So it's almost 600 a month now. Well, at that time, it was around $350 a month. They bought it at that time. This is about 6 years ago for $333,000. Right, 333. I remember the number. It's like, wow, that was kind of a unique number, right? 333,000. They had 5,000 out of pocket. Their payment with all the down payment assistance with the moderate income came out to 2,600 with HOAs included. So 2,600 a month, buying their first place, 5,000 out of pocket is all they needed, right? So they buy that first place, 5,000 out of pocket. we negotiate 2,000 back because the furnace, the ducting, asbestos ducting had a crunch in it, right? So they say that's an issue that needs to be replaced. So we got a quote for about 2,000 to fix that. So they give us 2,000 back. So guess what happens at the end of the escrow? My clients get a check for $2,000 back. They went in with $3,000 and purchased their first property in Ventura County in Oxnard, right? For $3,000 out of pocket. We sell that 2 years later at 400. I remember they were trying to get 412. We got 405, which was the highest sale at the time. So now we go from 3,000 out of pocket to $50,000 that they've made in equity. They sell their condo and Mrs. didn't want to sell the property. Family's there, everybody's there. They made it beautiful. They put in quartz countertops, fixed it, like it looked beautiful. Moved to Camarillo. They buy the place in Camarillo 2 years later. $50,000, $600,000 now. They got it at $595 entry level into Camarillo, right? This is about 1,600 square feet, three or four bedroom, 2 bath, over in a neighborhood that's decent, central Camarillo, but it backed up to like where Big Five is now. If you know that Arneal shopping center, it's Las Posas Arneal, Starbucks, Rick's, right? That whole shopping center, they were on the other side. So they had a house that all these houses were real close together, a little bit of a yard. They bought that place, got in at $595, thought they were overpaying, weren't 100% into it. Kitchen was original. We sell it 2 years later after that, sell it for $770,000.
Wow.
Starts with $3,000. Now they're up to $150,000 in equity after 2 moves, right? And I'm getting not death stares, but a hard time for Mrs. Like, I don't want to move again. We want a pool if we're going to do it. They don't get a pool. They buy a place in the Heights in a cul-de-sac at $770,000, or I'm sorry, $870,000, $100,000 more, because they had 150 now to put into this property. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So starting again with this down payment assistance with $3,000 out of pocket, they needed $5,000 of their own money. So that's the one thing you want to ask is these programs, they want your own, you got to have your own skin in the game, right? So you can get gift money, you can get other things, and you'll find out more about it. But the key is to know for as little as $7,500 out of pocket, you can purchase your first property. Was anybody else aware of that before hearing about that right now? You know about it?
Before of the short sales, also they give incentive for 8,000 to the buyer.
Right, that was another assistance program, yes.
I have a question is, I've seen some of the like a limit income one.
Right.
And then is it applied to this kind of?
It does, it
Uh-huh.
does. So you'll see also properties out there that are either low income properties or moderate income affordable properties, right? So those are things that typically you have to go through the city of Oxnard for. So VCCDC is still a good place because if they fit into those parameters, they'll tell you whether it's low income or moderate income. And you have to be careful because you don't want to offend anybody by saying, hey, guess what? You're qualified for low income. You know what I mean? So you got to be careful with how you say it. One thing for low income, just so you know, it's 80% AMI, area median income. Okay. So now you hear that there's programs out there that people can purchase with very little money down. Now, typically what they need to have, does anybody know what somebody needs to have to qualify to purchase a house? What are they looking at? What are they checking out?
Your job,
Your job, right?
taxes,
What do they care about with your job?
you've been at least 2 years with your current job.
2 years, okay, great. Any other things?
Taxes.
Credit, okay. Why is taxes important?
How
much you reported?
How much you reported, especially for self-employment, right? So you want to know whether they're self-employed or W-2. Okay, are they a wage earner? Okay, credit, I heard credit. Any other things that they're looking at?
Are they a US citizen?
What's that? US citizen? Yep, citizen's important. Okay, anything else?
This bank statement.
Bank statements, yeah. So bank statements, why are bank statements important?
How much money they have to do to give the down payment and to keep paying the mortgage.
Down payment, pay the mortgage, right? Your money down, right?
Money down.
So money down,
Your pay stubs,
pay stubs, okay? That's verification of what?
employment?
Yeah, verification of employment. Okay, so money down, any other things?
ID,
Yeah, 1 second. And
ID,
what's that?
ID.
ID?
Or
Yeah,
is it
so
citizen, right?
we had for citizen, right? So ID verification.
W2 form.
So typically, the things they're looking at is your credit. There's one that we're missing here. That's a big one. Credit, right? Collateral,
They look at your debt to.
your debt. That's the big one I was looking for. Why is the debt important?
Because if you have a lot of debt, they won't let you borrow a lot of money.
Right, what ratio are they looking for? Do you remember what it's called? Debt to debt ratio?
Debt to income.
Debt to income ratio, right? Debt to income, great. And just to give you guys a quick rundown, and I wasn't expecting to go this route, but this is an important thing to understand. For a lot of down payment assistance programs, especially, the magic number is 42% for debt to income, okay? And what that means is, I'm gonna use numbers to make it real easy, okay? So $10,000 a month, if that was their income, how much debt can they have, including their mortgage payment? There's a front end and a back end ratio. Don't worry about front versus back. All you need to understand is this concept of how much debt you can have versus how much your income is. If you were trying to stay under 42%, what the bank is trying to do is make sure that you aren't paying or obligated to too much. They want to make sure that you have money left over so that you can still pay for utilities and for eating and living, right? Other living expenses. So 42% is a safeguard there based on what your income is of how much debt you can have. And what kind of debt are we talking about?
Credit cards.
Credit cards,
loans,
what else?
Car loans.
Car loans. So credit card and car loans are important. So these are questions I'll literally ask on the phone with a first-time buyer and start getting a rough idea. Not everybody feels comfortable doing that. I don't recommend that you do that. Like, again, if they don't trust you yet, their wall's gonna be up before you start asking about, well, tell me a little bit about your debt, right? But these are ways I can find out really quick that somebody may be closer than they realize in terms of purchasing a home. So credit card debt, I don't care about the total amount of debt, and they'll typically tell you that. All I care about is what is your minimum monthly payment? It's your monthly debt, not your total debt. So the other one people get scared about is student loans. So I'll talk to a lot of people who went to law school or PhDs and have a lot in student loans. Well, I was able to purchase with a good amount of student loan debt, right? I know many others that have been able to because they care about what your monthly payment is, not the total amount, right? So what is your monthly credit card equal? So let's just say $200 a month, okay? Then let's say student loans, let's say is $700 a month. Let's say car payment, okay, is, let's just throw an amount. And what's important about car payment when we ask that question? Is it lease or purchase, right? Lease is a little more difficult because it's stipulated all the way through. Our purchase, what can we do with the purchase? You can pay it off or refinance it and lower the monthly payment. So there's different creative options of what you can do with whether they purchase it or a lease, okay? Now, you guys aren't gonna get into all this. All they have to understand is when I ask them questions, okay, how long have you been at your job? And they say, well, I've been here for 10 years. Well, that's great. 10 years, the same job? That's awesome, right? That's great for your qualification. How much debt do you have? You know, or what are your monthly debt, right? If I get into that. And this is at that first thing. And they're like, well, I got credit cards equaling about $400 a month. I got student loans up to $700. I got a car payment, or I have no car payment. Or they say I have no debt, which is phenomenal. But the thing is because they paid everything off, they have no money saved, right? So that becomes collateral, is your cash, how much money saved. And for most people, think of it $500,000, $600,000 right now. If you're purchasing at about 600K, right? How much money is minimum? If you're not using down payment assistance, what do you typically need to have if you're buying it around 600,000?
Regular like loan.
Yeah, what's the
About
minimum?
5 to 10%.
So 5 to 10, the lowest is 3.5
3.5.
typically. There are some 3%, but just plan on 3.5. So 3.5 at 600K is what? 3% is 18,000, right? Another 0.5% of that is, so another half of 6, it's another 3. So you're already at 21K just at 3.5%. What else is there that they need to come up with? Closing costs. Closing costs, let's just say another roughly 1%. So we'll say 6 to 8. So we'll say 8 on the high side. Okay. So $29,000 minimum at a 600 purchase price. Okay, that's 3.5. That's FHA. Most need 5%. right? But let's just say at the 3.5, 29,000, so about 30,000 out of pocket for 600. Now you see why that down payment assistance is huge, right? Because people may have 7,500 saved, they typically don't have 30,000 in the bank. Most people don't. The average person who doesn't own a home typically has less than 10,000 in assets. Typically, that's very common. So now they're looking at gift money, and there's other ways that you're gonna wanna know and research about this. The more you understand this, the stronger you're gonna be with helping people figure out how to get to home ownership. You don't have to be an expert. The lender's the expert with this. But if you understand that they need credit, right? The job history, more than 2 years, they've been there. So that's a check. Their credit is solid. They say it's in the 700s. And in credit scores, typically for the down payment assistance, it's higher than 660 is usually for the better programs. So just remember 660 or higher. There's 3 scores. They're looking at the middle score. Okay, it's the middle one that's the most important. It's almost like the average, but it's the middle score that needs to be above that 660. Now there's programs, FHA programs, that go down to the 5s. Okay, so you can still be under 600 and still qualify for a house. Typically, you're gonna have a higher interest rate though. And there's also things out there, I was sharing it with somebody that they didn't realize. Lenders will have something called a credit analyzer. So they can look at all their debt, look at all their monthly debt and see on that credit analyzer that basically, okay, if you pay this one down, where do people typically want to have their debt for a credit card? So say they have a $10,000 limit. Where do they want to keep it under to have the highest scores?
30%.
30%, that's right. So less than 30%, so you will increase the scores. If it's 50 to 75%, that's typically what's weighing their score down. So that's what an expert can talk to them and look at it. And that's something that they're not charging them anything for it. They're looking at all their debt. So what I say to people, as you're hearing all this process that can sound pretty complicated, when they start sharing with me some information, I say, well, that's exactly why you need to speak to a loan officer today, so that you can find out a financial snapshot of where you are today. Does that make sense? Because once we know where you're at, now we can figure out, 1, you may be ready to go. 2, it may be 6 months to a year out, and that's okay. But now we got a roadmap. Just like what we talk about with real estate and what it is that we do every day, you have to have a roadmap. You got to know. Otherwise, what are people doing? Trying to guess themselves.
Yeah.
And then they pay off all their debt. Well, they didn't have to pay off all their debt. They were allowed to have that 42% debt to income ratio. So that 42%, after you figure out all the payments, is what the mortgage is. And that's how they figure out what they qualify for. So you find out, okay, what are you paying in rent? And they say 2,600 a month. It's like, okay, 2,600. Okay. So now I add that up to the 200, that's 28, plus that 7, that's 35, car payment, let's just say it's 5. So that's already 4,000 a month. Okay. So 4,000 a month, 2,600 mortgage payment, right? 42%, remember, was the number that I said. So 42% is $4,200. So they can't go much more than a 2,600 a month unless they start paying down some debt. But they don't have to pay all their debt off, especially if I need to make sure that they got 29,000 in assets. So what I've heard doctors and other people do is they're so gung-ho on paying all their debt off, their student loan debt and everything, and they make good income, but they have no savings. So if they would have talked to a professional, they would have found out sooner that all they had to do was pay down a healthy amount of debt, still create that savings, because in that checking account, what's also important about the checking account? Why do we need to see bank statements? What are they looking for? What are the lenders, the underwriters looking for? Do you remember?
Like what's deposited into the account? Like the
Right.
amount of money
The
that's-
money has to be seasoned. Does anybody know what that means?
Yeah.
For at least 3 months, bank statements. So if you just put $10,000 that you have cash in a safe into, and I've had this happen, the buyer was ready to go, qualified, they were good to go. They had all this money in a safe that they didn't talk to me about or the loan officer. Now they got their pre-qual letter. They're doing down payment assistance, which this money gets utilized quick. And once it's all utilized and earmarked for certain buyers, then that's it. You can't, it doesn't just keep coming. It's not an unlimited amount of money. And these different programs, they go up to $100,000+ in down payment assistance. They have layered financing. I'm telling you about the best part, the forgivable grant. The other parts is financing that's typically 3% simple interest. Well, right now, because rates have been under 3, that doesn't even sound that awesome. But what simple interest is, if you have 30,000, which is a common amount at the 3% simple interest, that's $900 a year in interest. That's it. So it's only $900 a year to borrow $30,000. So you can divide the 900 by 12. It's not that much money. So that's just put on the back end of the loan, and that's what keeps your payment lower also. So it gives buyers more purchasing power because they have to stay under that 42% debt to income. Does that kind of make sense? I know it's kind of hard to conceptualize and understand all this. Biggest thing is you help a lot of homeowners or buyers who would not have been homeowners unless they took advantage of these programs. Okay, so this is what I did. If you didn't know, for 2 years, I was the director of realty at BCCDC. That's why I understand this stuff. And to be honest, I didn't know anything or very little on the lending side. I had my loan officer and I was just like, just talk to them. As long as they were good, I focused on the contracts piece of it. I didn't expect to get into this now, but it's important for everybody to have that basic understanding, because now you know, number one, if a loan officer is being straight up with you or not. When you can understand this stuff, you can kind of check them and know, okay, this person's good. Or maybe there's somebody better out there who can do a better job of explaining this. I've never done loans in my life, but once I started to understand this program, I got a lot more efficient with the buyers that I was talking to. Does that make sense? Okay. Does anybody want to take a picture? Any questions with us before I move to the next?
I was gonna ask about the letter that gives money from parents.
Yep.
Applies in that program.
It's allowed, but you still have to have your own money saved. So that's your own, yeah, if you can at least just get one. I know the marker's not great to see there. I think I'm gonna go with another one here. Okay, where are we at? We're at 9:30. There's quite a bit I want to cover, so you get it?
I'll get another.
Oh, there's a few down here, so I think we're good.
Okay.
We're good, right? Yeah. So does everybody kind of get that?
It's okay.
That's all right. We got
We have
some of
others.
this. We're gonna share. I raised time.
Sorry.
That's all right.
I
Okay,
do have one more question
yes,
related to this. I do have a first-time buyer and she worked for a small business. And they can, she's asking about her income tax return is
right.
the owner is a small business. They can either write a 1099 or W-2. Which one is make it easier for her?
W-2 is easier.
W-2 is easier.
Yep.
Okay.
That's good.
And
All
then
right,
you
yeah.
need to drop the notes to them.
What's that?
I can just drop the notes to anybody, so.
Cool, perfect. Okay, so what that portion was, and you'll hear me say this a bunch, is we have to identify where they're at point A and where they need to get to point B. Does that make sense? So we need to know where they're at. We need to know what they don't know yet, or what they do know is more important, right? But for most people, first we got to get their foot in the door. Then once we start talking to them and ask them questions, especially if they feel comfortable opening up, I will ask questions. I mean, it took me a while to get to this, where based on what they're sharing with me on their story, I'll ask them, have you ever had a BK, a bankruptcy, right? Why is that question important?
Because they cannot qualify for the loan.
It could affect it, but I want to know how long ago it was. 7 years is when it's off the credit report, but typically there's programs for FHA. It's minimum 2, but at least 3 years. If it was more than 3 years ago, they can qualify again. And that's another thing, that if people have gone through a BK, they're typically a little scared to get back into it because they already went through a bankruptcy. But they can qualify as early as, I know for certain, 3 years, possibly 2. So you want to check with your whoever you're working with on loans, ask them these questions. Say, how long does it take after bankruptcy? And there's 2 types of bankruptcy. There's chapter 7, I think it's 13 is the other one. So based on what type of bankruptcy it was. So one of them is they forgive everything. That one's harder to overcome. The other one is they just kind of like they restructure everything. So, but they're still making payments. On the one they're still making payments, that one's easier to be able to purchase again. Also short sales. They had a short sale or a foreclosure, they can still qualify again. There's programs out there because so many people went through it between 2008 to 2011, 2012. It was very common. So if they got rid of all those buyers from the first one, nobody would be purchasing again. So there are programs out there, but that's sometimes the reason why some buyers have to go FHA, even though their income is high, their credit's great. Because when people do a BK, it may sound like their credit's horrible. Most of them are in better credit shape than people who've never done a BK because they reset. And then now they're restructured and they're much more disciplined as they're going through. So their credit could be exceptional and they had a BK 3 years ago, right? So their credit could be great. Their savings could be great because again, they're not just paying interest every single month. They're able to save now because they got rid of everything. So for some people, that's the way to go. It's, it's always it's not always, but a lot of people think there's a negative stigma that goes along with it. But there's many successful people who've done it. Okay, so it's one thing that I'm not saying you're going to jump into that right away, but as you do this more and more frequently, you're going to hear kind of symptoms. And then as you hear the symptoms, you're like, okay, have you had a BK before? So I don't, and they'll say, no, I haven't. So that's great. Or yes, I did. Well, how long ago was it? That's what you want to know.
Can
Okay,
I say
go ahead.
something?
Yes.
So with that said, I had a client who had foreclosures, 5 to be exact, 5
Oh.
foreclosures in 08, investor.
Okay.
What they were able to do was buy a property with an adjustable rate mortgage. It was a little bit higher
Uh-huh.
for 2 years.
Okay.
That person bought the property and then now profited almost 400,000 on that property
Wow.
because they knew that their time was coming into it,
Uh-huh.
but they couldn't get any really great loan. The only thing they could get was a 5-year ARM.
Right.
So they refinanced the ARM at 1.5 years because it was up to that 3-year mark,
Right.
and then just said, okay, well, I'll get a 30-year fix right after that. And that was like a loan program that most people would say, no, never, I don't
Right.
want it. But this really worked for this person. They're like, I would get something at an 18%. It's the buy, not the
Right.
loan that I get. I can always change that as a loan.
Right.
So always think of that when you're working with a buyer.
Yeah.
It's gonna be, is this a long-term investment,
Right.
short-term?
And also the timing of when, it sounds like they probably purchased when
Yeah.
around 2016.
Probably it was 2016. So
So that was still a pretty strong time. Again, do you remember the bottom of the market? I'm gonna keep testing everybody. When was the bottom of the market? The very bottom where they say it was the lowest point. You remember? 2011, okay? So 2016 was 5 years later. What are the cycles for real estate growth? You remember?
It used to be 5 to 7.
Used to be 5 to 7, now
16
say it's getting closer up, right? So if we do the whole cycle, let's just say 7 and 7, that's 14 years to recover. So 11's the bottom, 5 to 7 years of growth, 7 years later is 2018, right? So 2016 was a time you could probably take a little bit of a chance with an adjustable interest rate. We're getting towards the top. So if you get an adjustable now, what are interest rates supposed to do this year? Continue to go up. That's where you can get in trouble, okay? So I'm not saying to not do it right now. It all depends on what your plan is, right? And for this particular person who had 5 foreclosures, that was the best they can get, but they got into something. And then another thing that happens, and this is very common, so this was also after Dodd-Frank in 2008, is they have mortgage insurance. You guys hear of mortgage insurance?
Yeah.
Do buyers like mortgage insurance?
Yeah.
Why not?
So expensive.
Right, so that example I showed you at 2,400, typically it's with $200 mortgage insurance on top of that. So they would have been right at that 42%, right at it. And that already gave me a ballpark of where people are at. Most buyers are trying to keep their payment under $3,000 a month. Rental prices are up even higher than that now, right?
Yeah.
So the magic number is typically 3. Now I'm hearing the magic number getting closer to under 4,000 a month. Okay, so now it's like, okay, we'll have a mortgage under 4,000 a month, and I feel comfortable with that. For me personally, no. I want to be around that 3 mark, and 3 still on the high side, at least for this area. At the same time, if the rent can be higher than what my client's payment is, their mortgage payment, I feel comfortable putting them into that house, because if they can't afford it, what can they do? They can rent it out and still have a positive cash flow and still gain equity and still have the tax write-off, right?
Yeah.
And still create wealth through home ownership. That's where there's a lot of agents who are scared, and I'm sharing this with you because that's how I know and I feel confident putting a buyer in a 30-year fixed rate loan, right? Knowing their payments aren't going to change very much, but when the prices appreciate, then people can refinance and drop that mortgage insurance. So that $200 a month extra they're paying in mortgage insurance, they can drop that off. That's a huge savings for most people. You drop that 200 a month, that's a game changer for a lot of people where it's like, and typically they got a better interest rate, so it went even further down. So now they're saving 200 to 400, but they got their foot in the game, right? We're able to purchase it. May have not been the dream house, but they got into home ownership, made some equity. All of them, I mean, especially in this last year, all made over 100,000 in equity. Okay, so now let's get into, so I typically don't spend that much time upfront on kind of how to get them to the next part. But if I can start building their confidence, like, you know what, you have 3 out of 5 boxes checked. Your job is good. Sounds like your credit's pretty solid, right? Your cash, you got about 10,000 saved up because you're living at home, you know, trying to save money. That's great, right? So you got 10,000 saved up. Debt sounds pretty minimal. If they're checking off 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 5, I'm going to say it is really important you speak with a loan officer as soon as possible. When they hear that, they're like, yeah, let's see where we're at, right? Because they realize they're closer. And all a lender's looking at is what is the risk that they're going to default on the loan. That's why they care about these numbers and these factors. They don't want to give any one of us a house that they're going to have to take back. They don't want to just take your money and then say, okay, now we got the house back. They don't want to be stuck with that. They make their money off the interest of people making their payments every single month. That's how they do well, is finding good qualified buyers that are going to continue to pay that interest every single month as long as possible. And their wealth continues to grow, okay? That's how they do it. So now getting to the home buyer class, okay? Few ways that I approach it. I'm gonna just jump right into the escrow process. But one of the things that I do before that, so I always draw that timeline, right? That's 0 to 30. Better markers.
Let me know I have some.
There we go, okay. So we'll just do the typical 0 to 30. The things I'm gonna say also to get them excited about trying to find out, what can they learn from a home buyer class? Some of you may have heard me say, what are the benefits to doing a buyer presentation or learning from a home buyer class? What are they gonna learn? Why do they wanna show up and learn about the process?
Does it want to be homeowners?
Okay, because they wanna be homeowners, but what are the different things I'm likely gonna cover in this? For those of you that have heard it before, what am I gonna cover that's gonna be to their benefit?
Like the timeline, the contingencies.
So timeline, the escrow process, right? That's one benefit. These are all benefits, right? Escrow process. What else are they gonna learn? You said contingencies. Why are contingencies important?
It's the most important. That's what's protecting them.
Protection, that's the key word. How are you protected by the contract? Okay, that's really important. California is a very, very consumer protective state. They're gonna protect whoever they feel like the power imbalance is, right? So if it's a landlord tenant, guess who they're gonna protect? The tenant. Okay, landlord has the power, they got the money, they own the home, right? They have all the strength in a situation with the tenant. So they're gonna employer, employee, who are they gonna protect? Employee, right? Seller, buyer, who are they gonna protect? The buyer. The contract is built. Why do you think all the contingencies are for the buyer? Because the buyer's taking all the risk. Seller, what happens with the seller after they sell a home?
They sold it.
They cash out, right? There's some duty, some liability, but they're in a great, they're liquid now. Now they got money, they can do whatever they want to do. That buyer, are they liquid?
No.
They're stuck, right? So this is what you want these buyers to understand. This is why some people have never purchased a home before, because it's so scared. They're like, I don't want to be married to my house. Have you heard that? I don't want to be, what do they say? House poor, right? Or, you know what I mean? They own a home, but they can't do anything. They can't go on vacations. They can't buy the things that they want because all they're trying to do, they jumped in too deep on that debt to income ratio, right? There's these very creative programs that are out there that people have got into that they're paying way too much on their mortgage. That's why we teach our buyers how to do it the right way. Okay, that's why you are all champions of the cause of putting people in positions to succeed. Does that make sense? That's what when I went to law school and I thought about it, and I felt guilty for some of my friends who lost their homes in the previous market crash. I did a lot of thinking out there. And all I knew is I was gonna come back and have a positive impact on the real estate community. I didn't know how, but I knew for certain. I didn't know I'd be selling real estate and protecting people that way, and that's a big part of it. I also help teach agents how to do it the right way, how to protect people, not just make big commissions, but how do we do it and serve other people and put them in places to succeed. And I know that that impact is bigger in this setting, as long as we're all trying to do the right things, okay? And when you believe in it, they hear it in your voice, and then they're gonna wanna meet with you as well, okay? So protection by the contract, the escrow process, what else do you think would be important to learn? Every single one of these things is something that you can make videos on and start doing social media posts and start educating and showing the public that you're the expert. Okay, so start outlining this and start coming up with different video topic ideas that you can do in 2 to 5 minutes, real quick. Or you open escrow, right? And now your client doesn't know what the next step is. So you should say, okay, now your focus is 1, 2, 3. Get everything over to the lender, right? Get them everything that they need. I'm going to send this information to escrow. What do you need to do in 3 days?
EMD,
EMD, right? What's an EMD?
earnest money deposit.
Okay, so buyer on top, seller on buyer, on bottom. So EMD, so we need to explain what the EMD is. Okay, out-of-pocket expenses. What are out-of-pocket expenses in selling your home?
Inspection and appraisal.
Yep. So inspections, so I just do $1, inspection,
Admin.
could be admin, that's a closing cost, right? We can talk about that, but they only pay that if we close, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
TC, some agents will charge their clients a TC fee. I personally pay for it myself, but some will charge it. So you want to be upfront about that if there's that. But admin's closing out of pocket. The reason why I typically don't have the admin over here is because if they cancel, this is what they lose. So I tell them this is the cost of doing business. They won't pay the admin if we cancel, but they will pay the inspection, which is how much usually for a home inspection?
400 to 600,
$400 to $600. What's an appraisal?
500 to 700.
Okay. So 500 to 700. So again, out-of-pocket expenses we're going to talk about. What is an appraisal, right? These are all things that if I'm talking to a buyer and I ask them the question, have you purchased a home? No, I haven't. Oh, well, that's great. I love helping first-time buyers, right? I teach classes and I can actually help teach you if you want to do a one-on-one or in a group setting. Would you be interested in learning about how you're protected by the contract? Different down payment assistance programs out there for first-time buyers. Would you be interested in learning how the escrow process works? Different negotiation tips. We're also going to talk about the market. What's happening right now? Is it a good time to buy? Okay. The whole thing with the market, this is a very important point if you ever teach home buyer classes. The best time to buy a home is when you're ready to buy. Period. Your income's in the right place, your debt's in the right place, your assets are in the right place. That's the best time to buy. Not listening to everybody else and saying it's a good time to buy or it's not a good time to buy. Because when everybody's saying it's a good time to buy and everybody's trying to get in on it, you know what happened at that bottom of the market around 2011, 12, 13? Guess who was getting the homes? You think it was all the buyers who wanted to buy? Who was getting them? All cash. It was all cash investors and buyers and agents swooping everything up. So very few people purchased a home in 2011, 12, and 13. The times that people can actually get the homes is when it starts evening out a little bit, which it didn't. It just shot straight up. And now it's that bidding war, low inventory situation that we've been experiencing since 2013 to now we're in 2022, right? So eventually the good news is it will level off. A lot of people are like, oh, it's not going to crash. It's not going to crash. It's not. Who knows what's going to happen there? Nobody knows. We don't know. And if it did come down some, that would be a good thing for a lot of people. Okay, because people are in good equity positions right now. Now they could lose that equity if it does shift and change. But the key is to know that escrow process, okay? Out-of-pocket expenses. So 2 main duties, and keeping this simple because it can get very complicated. What's the duty of the buyer and the duty of the seller? Say either one. Oh, let's just say duty of the seller. What's the seller's duty in selling their home?
Disclosures.
Disclosures, duty to disclose. And what do they have to disclose? Duty to disclose.
Going on with the house.
And that's called a material fact, okay, material. A material fact is anything that could affect the sales price, anything significant enough. If we're unsure, we disclose, right? If it may be something important, the way I explain it, if you were buying your own home, what would it be something that you would want to know? That's the way I explain it, so, okay? So that's seller's duty. Buyer's duty is to investigate. Duty to investigate. So when we're waiving our investigation, or we're waiving appraisals, we're waiving everything, because that's what they tell us we have to do to get into it. Be very careful with that, okay? Because when the market does correct, these are what the clients are going to be coming after. People representing both sides. They waived everything, didn't investigate anything, and those disclosures are very minimal. All right. So if you're doing either of it, and I've done it where I've represented the buyer and I've had to waive the appraisal, but I always have a backup plan. I always have other ways of getting out of the contract. If I have to waive something to do with inspections, there's different parts of it. They've done it on purpose. These attorneys aren't stupid. They know what's coming up. They know the market's going to shift. They know it. So they split the investigation into like 2-3 different parts. You don't have to waive all your investigation rights, right? You can shorten your time frame, but you still want it. So even if you're on the listing side, even if you can get the other side to waive everything, still give them 10 days to investigate. Everything is about what's called informed consent. Informed consent means that they saw something in writing. They knew about it, right? And they had time to make a decision, not pressured, not because, oh, well, we were one of 20 offers. The agent basically told us this is what we had to do to get our offer accepted. So we didn't investigate anything. It's a 1960s home. The roof looks like it's about to fall apart. You're seeing dry rot all around the place. But in order for us to, we lost out on 15, 20 homes. So that's what we had to do. Who are they going to point the finger at? And again, courts, who are they going to look at? Do they think the agent is the one to protect or the buyer who purchased the home?
The buyer.
The buyer. We have a fiduciary duty to look out for their financial best interest. We get paid a lot of money to protect our clients, not to just close a deal, not just to put it in. If you're getting the weird feeling inside, then you need to talk to one of the managers ASAP before the bell is rung. What that means is before all those contingencies are removed, that's when you need to talk to us because we can do something then. After all the contingencies are removed, we're locked and it's going to be very difficult. It's still not automatic that earnest money goes over, but we're locked. If we're getting to repairs and there's not a lot of repairs that are going on, but if we have repairs and we're getting close to closing, there's 5 days prior called the, what's the form we get? BP? Yeah, verification of property condition. We do that final walkthrough. That's our last chance to catch anything. If we see something, there's things that are left at the house, if there's all kinds of stuff and you know there's a good chance that's going to be there after you close, you need to talk to us before then. So we come up with an aggressive plan to make sure that gets remedied before we close. Because after it closes, now there's a good chance, even though the contract says it's supposed to be done through mediation or arbitration, but there's a good chance we're going to have an issue. It's a lot easier to get it fixed before we close, before that seller has their money. Okay, so we could, and we never want to do this, but we want the other side to be worried that we can delay funding and recording. We don't want to fund and record until we know everything's where it should be with the condition of the home. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So you know, lawsuits and situations are typically at contract formation and cancellation when we do our request for repairs. Okay, so now we got 17 days. Contracts changed. So you got 0, 3, 7, 17. Used to be 21. We got rid of that. Then I say 5 days before. So let's just say 25. And never try to do the BP on the day of closing. Always do it at least the day before it records or confirms. Okay, so I'd say between day 25 and day 29. And I pulled up some case study and I saw that an agent was held in breach of their fiduciary duty because they did the final walkthrough after it closed. And they said that that was sloppy on the agent. What's the other thing an agent has to do that you hear other companies waive? What form does an agent have to complete? The AVID, Agent Visual Inspection Disclosure. It's great. You guys you're answering this really good for our first time going through this together as a group. That AVID is critical. That's another thing that will put you in breach of your fiduciary duty. And don't write nothing noted. Okay, I argue with agents who've been doing this for 30+ years all the time. I've heard 2-3 different attorneys talk about this. They go through and they put nothing noted, nothing noted, nothing noted, nothing noted. Don't do that. You're better off leaving it blank, but don't leave it blank. At least acknowledge, and I've heard people criticize this, but I've heard attorneys say it. Acknowledge what kind of flooring you have. Put dual pane windows, put a ceiling fan, shows that you looked up at the ceiling. You want to show that you've walked around that whole house. Now, you're not an inspector. You're not opening cabinets. You're not flipping the lights on. You're not testing everything. It's an agent visual inspection disclosure, but you need to show that you walked around that entire house. Okay, so whatever you have to do, some people go overboard, and I don't want to say it overboard. You're better off covering your, doing too much than doing too little. Okay, but go through the place, note things that you see, and then if you say cracks, just put put it like this. It's actually kind of vague in terms of how we describe it. It could be one, it could be multiple. We don't say, you give kind of a rough idea, but you don't say large or small. You don't say a small hole, you just put holes, right? Just, this is some informed consent. The buyer reads it, they see that you've noted it, now they have a duty to investigate, okay? So 7 days for seller disclosures. If they do these late or incomplete, that's another hole for that seller or for that buyer to get out of the contract. So you want to complete disclosures, all disclosures. If you're in an HOA situation, make sure that gets ordered up front. Jump on your escrow. Say, have the sellers paid for it yet? Have they initiated the CC&Rs? Because when that goes out towards past 17 days, guess what? That buyer's still got a way out of the contract. If you're selling a home to buy another home, this is going to cause issues. You need to jump on it right out the gate. When do we do our inspection and appraisal?
Right away.
As early as possible, definitely in the first 7 days, okay? Because we want to have enough time as possible to see what comes up, and we may have to further investigate. That home inspection, that's how I explain it. It's like a jack of all trades, master of none. They're going through and they're looking for red flags in your electrical, in your, it could be gas, it could be plumbing, it could be any, in your attic. So the home inspection is important. What else is important for inspection that you should do almost automatic in every transaction? Termite. Don't write it in the offer, because then it becomes a condition of close, unless you have VA. VA is the only time you have to write it in. Because seller, and I don't know if you know this or not, for a VA offer, seller has to pay, or actually anybody but the buyer has to pay for the termite inspection report. The repairs are negotiable, but the buyer cannot. It's against the law for the buyer of a VA buyer to pay for that termite inspection. So that's the only time you write it in. And then also write in Section 1 and Section 2 clearance if you can. In a more negotiable market, you're going to put for the seller to pay for Section 1 and Section 2 clearance. Does everybody know what Section 1, Section 2 is? Anybody haven't heard of Section 1, Section 2? Okay. So what Section 1, Section 2 on a termite report is, typically Section 1's active infestation of termites. Section 2 is anything that could lead to it, right? So it could be like fungus. Sometimes fungus will be under Section 1 because they're saying it's active, right? But if it's active termites in there, that's Section 1. Section 2, a more common one, is a stain in the attic. So they see that there could be a leak in the roof or a plumbing leak, right? There was some type of leak from a toilet. So they'll actually, the termite will check the toilets and they'll look under the cabinets to see if there's any stains there. Those are all Section 2. So Section 2 clearance becomes a deal breaker in a lot of situations, because if that roof is shot, you take a VA buyer, and I'm all for taking VA offers, right? But you take one, you could need a roof certification in order to get that Section 2 clearance. Most roofers right now are not giving out roof certifications. There were some heavy rains about 3 to 5 years ago. They don't give those out lightly. So you have to find a roofer who's willing to do a roof certification. Most are going to say, you need a new roof. So now who's willing to fork out $12,000 to $15,000 on a check? It's the deal's done. The second you start going down that route, it's very hard to overcome those challenges. Okay. So I'm hoping this, kind of just at least raises the awareness level as you're negotiating. And when you share this kind of stuff with both your sellers, they feel more confident in you. When you start talking about, well, if we do take a VA offer, not saying that we don't want to, we need to be aware that we could be required to get Section 1 and Section 2 clearance. Okay. So if you don't know enough about it, call me up, call Amelia up, call somebody who specializes in VAs and ask more questions. And if we don't know the answers, I'll probably put you in touch with my dad, he's retired military, knows everything about VA. Okay. So I can give you his information as well. And he's basically retired right now. He loves to help. And so anything VA related, even if people are there's so much cool stuff on the VA side, we'll do another class for that. Okay. Do something specific. All right. So we got to the 7 days. If it's late on disclosures, what happens?
They give you more time.
How much more time?
3 days.
5 days. Okay. So before it used to be where sellers did termite reports almost automatic, they took that out of the contract. So that was always the last thing that came was that termite report. And if it wasn't a complete report, you had 5 days later. So just know if disclosures come in day 16, you got until now 21 days to remove that disclosure contingency. Okay. Or if you've already removed it, it can reopen a hole. So when we're trying to get out of a contract at some point, again, that's when you're calling us up and checking with us. Okay, this is what happened. I'm going to say, okay, send us disclosures. I want to look at your disclosures. I'm looking for every hole I need, because if this other side's going to try to fight, go after earnest money deposit, we need to know what outs do we have. Does that make sense? So that's why it's key to have that conversation going through the process. Okay, so that's the 17 days. After this, typically around the last week, what are we looking for with the buyer? What is it that we're getting excited? We know we're kind of in that home stretch. There's two things that are triggered. What was it? Loan?
Contingents and loan removal.
Yeah, so at day 17, we want to hear, what do we want to hear from the lender? There's a few questions I want to get to and I'm going to talk about it, but go ahead. What do we want to hear from the lender at day 17 before we remove all our contingencies?
CD and they're ready to close.
So you brought CDs, closing disclosure, that becomes important. It's called final clear to close. Okay, you'll hear conditional approval. Conditional approval means there's still conditions. You got most of it approved. It's been submitted to the underwriter, but you need to find out what those conditions are. And how long is it going to hear till we hear final clear to close, or CTC, clear to close? That's what you want to hear before you remove that loan contingency. And put your loan officer on the spot. Hopefully you have a good relationship with them and call them out on it. Say, do you feel confident in removing our loan contingency? And if they're like, oh, I can't say that, that's a red flag to you. You need somebody who says, yes, I feel confident. Because if they always say, oh no, I can't tell you that, then they're not looking out for you. They're looking out for themselves. And there's something they don't know. Just like if a buyer's not willing to commit, there's something we need to know. We need to dig deeper. Tell me, what is it going to take for you to do it? And some will say, I'll never tell you to remove the loan contingency. It's like, oh, really? You'll never tell me? Okay, well, that's great. Well, I guess this is the last deal we're doing together, right? Because I need somebody who feels confident in what they're doing. You're not going to leave me out on the limb. Your loan officer is probably the most important piece of your partnership that you need to succeed, especially early in your career. All right. If you don't have somebody that you know and you trust with your own business, your own personal business of you doing it in your family, then you probably shouldn't be working with them. And I'm just going to be very direct about it. You got to find there's good loan officers out there, right? But there's others that aren't the greatest. Just like there's good agents and there's others that aren't the greatest. We all need to be our best and work with the best. And when I started when I was 22, I had somebody who had been 20 years in the business. And I interviewed 2 or 3 of them. And I felt comfortable with this one. And she was great. And she had her reputation. So I never got a single referral from her. But that's not what I was looking for. I was looking for somebody who was good at their job. I knew I could do my part. And I needed her to do her part. And she did great. So it was a great career for a while, right? And then at some point, found some other good people. That's how it worked out, So that's a big piece. So we got the 17 days. We removed all our contingencies. We heard final clear to close. Okay. Now, as as we heard, the closing disclosure, the CD, do you know what a CD is? What's the CD?
Certified deposit.
No, a different CD. So what we'll hear around the same time you hear that clear to close, and don't be tricked by this, because they try to do it. Oh, we already issued the CD. So yeah, you're in good shape. And they try to act like, because they know most agents don't know. The CD is the closing disclosure. They have 3 days after that now that the buyer can back out of the deal. What the closing disclosure has on it is confirmation of what was quoted up front in terms of what the costs were, the closing costs, what interest rate they had, all that, and it can't vary much from what was initially quoted. In the past, back in the day, in like 2004, it changed all the time. The rates changed. The loan officers made more money. So there's something called TRID that passed. You don't need to know what TRID is, but that passed, that made it a lot tighter from what that initial quote is to what that closing disclosure is. That CD's to check the loan officer, to keep them honest, okay? So now they have 3 days from when that's issued. It can be done by e-signature. If it's signed, 7 days. So you always want it done by e-signature. So always check with your clients up front. Not everybody has emails. They need to have an email for the CD. Otherwise, you're going to be delaying your closing. Okay. So 3 days after that CD is signed, then they can do loan docs. Loan docs in that last week. Loan docs is a fat stack of papers. Anybody who hasn't seen it, it's notarized. They go through everything. That's all your loan terms. And if you're doing down payment assistance and there's 3 layers, you're doing 3 sets. Right? So they will have wrist cramps at the end of that. So, maybe a little gift to stretch their wrist out and some other things. But it's 3 sets of those things, right? So that's loan docs. After loan docs are signed, typically it's in the last week. Then once that's signed, it's submitted back to the underwriter. Underwriter sees it. There could be mistakes. They could send some stuff back. There can be some final conditions. So then you'll hear, when you ask about conditions, you say, is it pre-doc conditions or pre-funding conditions? 2 different types of conditions, okay? Pre-doc is the one that most people are focused on, but there could always be pre-funding. And so some of them, they can remove all of them, and as long as they do like the verification of employment prior to funding, you're good to go. And that's where some lenders will say, I'm sorry, I can't tell you until every box is checked. And it's like, well, I need to tell you, if this were your deal, you doing it for yourself, you would feel comfortable saying that the deal is going to go through, right? And that's what I'll ask them. If they won't say, yes, I'll remove it all, I'll say, is it going to go through? How certain are you? You keep telling me that you're certain. You keep telling me it. Why don't you put it in writing? Send me an email saying that we're good to go. So I'll send them an email and say, okay, our 17 days, this date, this is like on day 10 or 11. And I'll say, are we looking good? Or should we have everything? And they'll typically say it's based on the appraisal. That's the main condition they're waiting for. Once we hear that appraisal come back, everything else is in and everything else looks good. If you hear the question you asked about the self-employed versus W-2, if it's self-employed, taxes are usually the deal breaker. They haven't paid their taxes weren't done correctly. So make sure when you talk to your loan officer, is everything good with their taxes? Are you waiting on anything? Yeah, they still need to file it. We need a tax transcript. That's going to cause issue down the road. Okay, just telling you from experience of situations that we've had.
So it would be fair from the very beginning to let the clients know to have everything ready, like their documents to gather them, and even before they go to the loan officer. Will that be something?
I'll have them talk to the loan officer first. I want to make it easy for them to meet face to face. Just like I'm giving you guys a much more in-depth, higher level than I'm going to do with most buyers, because I'm also trying to train as agents, right? Not just teach what I'm going to teach in a home buyer class, but the concepts are the same. We're just getting into a lot more detail. Again, this is about making it as easy as possible, but they also have to know there's some complexity to it as well. Why do they need you? Why do they need you to lead them through the process? If you can get up here and teach this class next time we get together, that's strong. And it's up front, you may be like, there's no way. And it's very easy. Actually, if you keep it simpler, and then you'll keep getting better and better and better. And the more that you do it, you're going to see. That's why I say with certainty, when I meet with the client, we go through any part of this process, they're my client. And I'm not trying to be egotistical or anything. I've seen it work. This works. So you have to take the time to educate your clients. And when you do it, they're gonna be your client. This is so much stronger, as well as they're gonna be equipped so that when they go and look to write an offer, they're so much quicker to write offers because they know how to get out of the contract, right? You show them how to get out. So now they're less hesitant to get in. Where if you can't get them to write, it's because they don't get all this. They don't know what to expect, right?
Now, another question is, I have another buyer is not first time buyer, the investment property buyer.
Uh-huh.
So what we look into, they already own a home, there's gonna be their investment property.
Right.
Is it gonna be the same or is?
For an investment property?
Yeah, that's income ratio, so see how much
Different for qualifications.
different qualifications.
Yeah, so qualifications is different. In terms of the process, it's the same.
Processes.
Process is the same, and I would still explain it the same. I would just make sure they're talking to a lender about investor specific loans. Because the rates are typically a little higher, things are different. Yeah, and good question. Any other questions just in terms of the process? I mean, really at the end, I always say we get to the final stretch. Funding is the day before closing. Sometimes you can do it on the same day. It wasn't happening for a while, now it's starting to happen again. But typically, day 29 is funding, and then closing, you get your keys, right? We're not talking about anything complicated yet. If I were doing a home seller class, I'd be more focused on the disclosure side, still telling them about the buyers, and I'd be setting proper expectations through it. I'm telling you, a seller class, if anybody does that, that's huge. It's really big, and you'll find sellers who want to learn. You also find FISBOs who are just trying to get free information. But it gives you an opportunity to meet them, and they may see like, okay, this is more complicated than I realized it was, right? So it's a great way to find sellers. But the buying class will lead to sellers as well, because it's people who haven't purchased in a while. And so that's another reason. So if they say, oh yeah, I've bought before, this would be our second home, great. How long ago was that? They say more than 10 years ago? Well, that's actually the reason why we need to get together. A lot's changed. Right? Termite is a perfect example. Termite was almost expected to be done every single transaction. Huge lawsuit with a property by the beach, $80,000 in termites. The agent told them, yep, you got to pay for it. So seller paid for it, sold the house, sued that agent, sued Coldwell Banker, sued the whole brokerage, right? And won because they made it sound like, that's why you have to be careful and say that's customary. It's not automatic, right? But if you say it's customary and they think that they have to do it, what does the seller have to fix when they sell a home? Well, something, but yeah, very little, right? But pretty much, what's the contract say? It's an as-is sale, right? So what do they have to fix? And this is something I actually always teach. So required period. What was it?
Health and safety.
Not health and safety, that's what we negotiate though. Health and safety is actually for the request for repairs. We always want to focus on health and safety. That's how we justify it. When we talk about liability, right? We want to emphasize liability with the other agent and just say, hey, look, health and safety, let's just try to make this as clean as we can, right? If it's been laid out up front, that's one thing, but the required water heater strapping. What's the other one? Smoke detector and carbon. That's it. Okay, so smoke detector, carbon, I always say 3 things, and water heater. There are a couple more in different areas. Carbon monoxide, smoke detector, and water heater. Okay, so I'll say there's 3 things they have to do, and I'll test them on it. What are the 3 things? Water heater, and it's not all up to code for the water heater. A lot of the code has changed. It's just the double strap. That's it. Water heater has to be double strap. Smoke detector, what's the rule for smoke detectors and carbon monoxide?
Every room. One per.
Level? Yep, 1 floor or level. So 1 in the hallway. So if you have upstairs, downstairs, 1 in that hallway, 1 in the down. And I've also heard the rooms, and I've had home inspectors argue, different home inspectors argue with each other on the requirement. If it's a home, I believe, built after 1990s, and you got to verify this, it's every single room. Okay, every bedroom. If they've had supposedly more than $1,000 in upgrades and updating their house, and it's an older house, then now that's also in each bedroom as well. Okay, so the safer route to go is each bedroom. Okay, that is the safer route. But I hear differences. Most appraisers are just looking, unless it's a newer built home, they'll look in every bedroom. Most appraisers are just looking in the hallway of the upstairs, hallway of the downstairs. Okay, carbon monoxide is just 1 on each floor. So if you have 2 floors, one's in the hallway upstairs, one's downstairs.
And before 1990, every room.
Before 1990, it actually was just one in the hallway upstairs and one downstairs. You only needed 2. Now it's every single bedroom.
Everything.
Yep. So it's a good one to know and good to be prepared for, because you don't want that appraiser to have to re-inspect. There's typically $100 re-inspection.
Every single room? Or
Bedroom.
Bedroom
Not every,
specific,
every
okay.
bedroom. Yep, every bedroom, one in the hallway. If there's 2 floors, one in the hallway upstairs, one in the hallway downstairs.
Carbon monoxide.
Carbon monoxide's one on each floor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And the smoke detector and
Yeah.
every room.
Every bedroom is typically the safe way to go, but most appraisers are only looking to that one in the hallway upstairs and downstairs. But if it's a newer build, 1990 or newer, then they should be in every bedroom. But that's important to know, because again, a lot of sellers, and I've heard sellers tell me, or buyers tell me, or their parents tell me, oh, no. We had to fix all the safety items. Every safety issue has to be fixed. And they tell me that, and I'm just like, well, I don't know who your agent was, but that's what we want to try to do, right? We want to try to alleviate all the safety things, but by contract, it's only water heater, smoke detector, carbon, okay? Ventura, what else is required?
Sewer.
Sewer lateral,
sewer
right?
line.
Within the last 10 years, needs clearance. So seller has to pay for the sewer lateral inspection. It just needs to be cleared in order for that transaction to go through, but that's still negotiable. That's also for the repairs when you're talking VA. So VA, when I say section 1, section 2 are required, right? The repairs are still negotiable. Most people don't know that. So it just has to be cleared. Doesn't mean that the seller has to pay it. And so if you're working with an agent, you have a VA buyer, and that agent's like, no, we're not gonna take it because we're not paying for any repairs. Say, okay, I've already spoken to my buyer. My buyer's willing to cover any section 1, section 2 repairs, okay? So don't let that be the reason why you don't pick us. And then I'll put that in my email as well, just to make it very clear that we're gonna cover those costs. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I don't lose it because that agent either isn't informed enough or doesn't inform their client of the right information. I'm not gonna lose it based on that. Now, if I'm in a market where we're negotiating, that seller's paying for everything. I'm gonna push on that. There used to be a thought that they had to cover closing costs as well. That's not true. But VA specialists will make the other side think that they have to cover closing costs. So it's no money down. I'm telling you, it's a nasty business. There's people taking advantage of people all over. So the key is to be informed. The downside to that, though, is not only were these agents able to take advantage of it, they've created a negative stigma. So now people are scared to take VA offers. When your VA offers, and especially when the market shut down or when they shut everything down in terms of jobs, guess who the best buyer was? It was military. VA wasn't losing their job. Everybody else was on the fence. VA military was like DOD, Department of Defense deals, and military were my strongest buyers at that time. And no money down, 100% financing, lower rates than conventional and FHA. And we knew that the deal was going to get done. So now, like in a month, I was able to flip it and then put all my military in. It was awesome, really good for them. So that's really the key. I mean, this is a majority of it here. Feel free if you guys want to take a picture of that one too. Any questions? I know I went into a lot. You guys all probably need a beer or something now.
Or you need a water.
I need a water. I'm spitting all over. Yeah, no, it's any questions just in terms of that, how to explain it, how to teach it. Do you feel just a little bit more equipped just in terms of the process? Is this helpful?
Yes, a lot.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
No, we want to be the experts, the specialists. If any of this is confusing, set something up with us so we can take some time and really dive into it. Because I want you all to feel strong every time you're speaking to your clients. And the more confident you are with this, you're going to see it changes your approach on the phone. You're like, let's get together. I got so much stuff I need to share with you. You know what I mean? I got so much, but you make it specific towards what they need and just give it to them in baby steps. Sometimes I go through the whole process, but I've never had anybody sit through this, at least on the buying side, and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so confused. Or they'll say, I'll need another reminder when we get closer to it. Like this is all just like another language as you're speaking to me. But guess what? They are stuck with you at that point.
Yeah.
They know that I need you. to help me through this process, because I don't get it, but you get it. And one guy was a mechanic. I went to high school with him, and he was just like, look, my thing's this, Matt Baldonado. My thing's this. He's like, you know this? He's like, I'm like that Rocket Mortgage commercial. And he's like, I needed it. This is all just out of my comfort zone. And he was nervous. He's like, I'm freaking out. I'm nervous. And I said, just like I know you're looking out for me when I drop my car off with you, I got you. You know what I mean? Like, don't worry about this. I promise you're gonna be in a good spot. He got a house in Cameron under 500,000 detached. About 5-6 years ago, my parents had the listing, so off-market listing, called me up, you got any buyers? I said, yep. And I called him, he told me just days before, I'm not buying anything, I'm not doing anything, I need to take at least 3 months off, kind of get my stuff figured out. And I called him anyways, I said, I know what you just told me. I said, but I just got an opportunity to drive by this property. It's over by Berry Street. It's off Dumetz. He's redone the whole place now though. And now the place has to be close to 800,000. It's like 700,000 to 800,000. And this was, yeah, actually, I don't think it was even 5-6 years. It was around maybe about 3 years ago. He got it at 495. So it's crazy when you can do things like that, right? And you will, you're gonna come across opportunities and do it, but there's this process, and I hope this helps with the start. So thanks, guys. Unless there's any other questions, I'm just trying to keep it going. No other questions? All right, well, let's wrap it up. Thank you.
Awesome.